Princess Anne breaks silence as royal divorce drama reaches a turning point. At exactly 9:30 a.m. GMT, a carefully worded statement was released from the Royal Communications Office, one that immediately sent shockwaves through both legal and royal circles. For the first time since the public confirmation of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's legal separation, a senior member of the royal family had spoken directly, and that voice belonged to Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, known inside the monarchy as its most disciplined and uncompromising guardian of tradition. According to the statement, Princess Anne confirmed the existence of a previously undisclosed marital clause, an internal agreement allegedly drafted during the early months of Harry and Meghan's marriage prior to their formal exit from royal duties in 2020. The clause, referred to internally as a sovereign lifestyle accommodation provision, outlined a series of personal expectations, not royal guarantees. These expectations reportedly included access to elite travel arrangements, private aviation, high-security residences, and luxury accommodations comparable to diplomatic standards. Princess Anne made one point unmistakably clear. These conditions were never approved, never ratified, and never recognized by the royal household as official obligations of the crown. Despite this, the clause later appeared in legal filings submitted in California, where Meghan's legal team allegedly cited the failure to meet these expectations as contributing factors in the breakdown of the marriage. That argument, however, did not survive judicial scrutiny. In a closed session held on January 30, 2026, the California court reportedly dismissed the claim outright, stating that private marital expectations, especially those resembling state-level privileges, hold no standing under U.S. family law. Legal observers described the court's reaction as unusually firm. The filing was said to be incompatible with public policy, and the clause itself was characterized as symbolic rather than enforceable. Princess Anne addressed the ruling with calm authority. The royal family does not permit private expectations to be misrepresented as institutional commitments, the statement read. Any suggestion that royal estates, resources, or diplomatic privileges were contractually owed is categorically false. But the statement did not stop there. In a moment that many commentators described as rarely direct, Princess Anne expanded the discussion beyond legal technicalities towards something deeper. She warned against what she called the commercialization of private family matters, particularly when children are involved. Without naming names, she emphasized that royal identity cannot be used as leverage, branding, or emotional currency in legal or media disputes. For viewers of the Capital storyline, this moment marks a clear shift. For years, the monarchy relied on silence. Now, that silence is breaking, not in anger, but in clarity. Two worlds are separating in real time. The institution, bound by restraint and continuity, and individual narratives shaped by personal ambition and media exposure. And as this story unfolds, one thing becomes increasingly clear. This is no longer just a celebrity divorce. It is a test of boundaries, responsibility, and legacy.
The Media Storm, the podcast in the palace draws a line. Within hours of Princess Anne's statement, the story exploded beyond courtrooms and palace walls and straight into the global media bloodstream. The trigger was not a tabloid headline or leaked document, but a viral podcast episode released on January 31st, hosted by Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson. The episode, titled The Mirage of Virtue, rapidly climbed streaming charts, drawing millions of listeners in less than 2 days. Peterson's central argument was not legal, but symbolic. He claimed that Meghan Markle's post-royal public identity, built around themes of victimhood, empowerment, and moral resistance, stood in sharp contrast to elements of her pre-royal social and professional networking life. His tone was clinical, not theatrical, but the implications were incendiary. According to the podcast, Peterson referenced a collection of open-source materials, anonymous testimonies, and archived digital traces, suggesting Meghan had previously moved within elite global social circles long before her royal marriage. None of this activity was described as illegal, but Peterson framed it as strategic, arguing that it complicated the simplified narrative later presented to the public. One recurring symbol in his commentary was a luxury yacht frequently cited online, used not as an accusation, but as a metaphor. In Peterson's words, Meghan represented a modern figure navigating power structures fluently, then later condemning those same structures once symbolic leverage had been secured. The palace did not respond directly to the podcast. Instead, Princess Anne's earlier statement quietly absorbed the shockwave. Her clarification that no member of the royal family, no sovereign office, and no royal funds were ever connected to private luxury travel or foreign social events served a strategic purpose. It separated institutional monarchy from individual biography. That distinction mattered, because as speculation spiraled online, a dangerous conflation was taking hold, one that risked painting royal life itself as indulgent, extravagant, or morally compromised. Behind palace doors, officials were said to be increasingly concerned about optics. At a time when the public faces inflation, housing pressures, and economic uncertainty, the monarchy could not afford to appear associated, even indirectly, with images of unchecked luxury or celebrity excess. Princess Anne addressed this head-on. She reaffirmed that royal finances are tightly regulated, sourced largely from estate revenues, tourism, agriculture, and heritage operations, not from private indulgence or commercial ventures. Public funding through the sovereign grant, she noted, represents only a fraction of total expenditure and is subject to transparency rules established decades ago. Her message was subtle but firm. The monarchy would not allow itself to be dragged into narratives it does not control, especially narratives shaped by platforms, podcasts, or personal branding campaigns. For the capital storyline, this marks a crucial pivot. The palace is no longer reacting emotionally, it is reasserting structure. The focus is shifting away from allegations and toward accountability, away from spectacle and toward boundaries. And with media pressure intensifying, the question is no longer what was said on a podcast. The question now is, how far is the monarchy willing to go to protect its identity, and what comes next for those who once stood inside it?
Children, custody, and the moral line the palace would not cross. As headlines continued to swirl and online speculation intensified, the British royal family quietly shifted its focus away from media narratives and legal technicalities. Instead, attention turned to what Princess Anne would later describe as the only issue that truly endures: the children. In a tightly managed briefing held behind closed doors, senior palace aides confirmed that Princess Anne had requested internal assessments, not of contracts or reputations, but of stability. The concern was not symbolic, it was practical. How often had the children changed residences? Were schooling routines consistent? Had commercial schedules disrupted daily life? No figures were released publicly, but the tone of the palace response suggested unease. Princess Anne's subsequent remarks were among the most candid ever delivered by a senior royal in relation to Prince Harry since his departure from royal duties. Marriage disputes are private, but childhood instability is not. Without directly naming either parent, Anne criticized what she framed as the prioritization of image management over emotional continuity. She warned that repeated relocations, prolonged travel, and high-profile legal disputes risk creating an environment of uncertainty, one that no child should be expected to navigate. For royal watchers, this was a moment of reckoning. The monarchy has historically avoided public commentary on parenting. To do so now signaled that internal concern had reached a threshold.
According to sources familiar with the discussion, Anne was particularly disturbed by the framing used in the California divorce filing, where the absence of luxury accommodations and elite travel access was cited as a central grievance. To her, that framing revealed a dangerous disconnect. This is not a dispute over childcare or housing. It is an attempt to elevate indulgence into entitlement. Behind the scenes, one palace advisor reportedly said. Behind the scenes, Princess Anne was said to be deeply frustrated, not just by the legal strategy, but by what she viewed as a moral inversion, where privilege was presented as necessity, while stability was treated as secondary. Yet despite the intensity of her concern, the palace remained restrained. There were no personal attacks, no direct responses to viral accusations, no engagement with online speculation. Instead, Anne ordered contingency planning. Royal legal advisors were asked to prepare frameworks for potential future scenarios, should custody arrangements become prolonged, or should media exposure begin to intersect with commercial activity involving the children. The palace made one thing clear. While it had no intention of intervening in American court proceedings, it would not ignore developments that risked long-term harm to minors connected to the royal lineage. This shift reframed the entire saga. What once appeared as a celebrity divorce now carried institutional implications, not because of scandal, but because of responsibility. Even commentators who had long criticized the monarchy noted the change in tone. The palace was no longer defending tradition for its own sake. It was defending structure, routine, and restraint, values increasingly rare in an age of monetized identity. Meanwhile, public discussion began to turn. Sympathy, once driven by narrative and emotion, started recalibrating around questions of consistency and parental focus. Observers asked whether either side appeared more invested in resolution than in leverage. For Princess Anne, the answer was clear. Children must never become accessories to adult conflict, nor instruments of narrative power. And as this chapter closed, one realization settled in. The most serious consequence of the Sussex rupture was no longer reputational, it was generational.
The final line, when the crown ends the age of ambiguity. 3 days after the California court dismissed the luxury-based divorce claims, and less than 48 hours after Princess Anne's rare moral rebuke, the monarchy began preparing for what palace aides quietly described as a defining intervention. An official press conference was scheduled, not routine, not symbolic, and not accidental. Princess Anne, acting in her senior advisory capacity, was set to outline the monarchy's position on 3 unresolved questions that had lingered since 2020. Prince Harry's institutional status, the long-term framework surrounding the children, and the Crown's response to continued media association with private controversy. Behind closed doors, preparations were described as meticulous and unceremonial. Senior advisors reviewed precedents, legal boundaries, and reputational risks. For the first time since Harry and Meghan's departure, one question was no longer considered hypothetical. If Prince Harry were to seek proximity to royal life again, under what conditions, if any, would that be possible? According to palace sources, the answer would not be emotional. It would be structural. Any future consideration, Anne made clear, would require full separation from commercial ventures tied to royal identity. Media contracts, branded foundations, and narrative-driven enterprises would have to be conclusively disentangled. There would be no half-in, half-out space left to occupy. Equally important, Anne was expected to address the growing misuse of royal symbols in global media, where titles, imagery, and implied endorsement continued to appear long after formal duties had ended. Her message was firm. The Crown would no longer tolerate ambiguity. Private individuals, regardless of lineage, could not reattach themselves to royal meaning when it suited commercial or reputational goals.
Identity, once relinquished, could not be selectively reclaimed. This marked a profound shift. For decades, the monarchy relied on distance and discretion. Now it was asserting definition. Internally, this approach had a name: symbolic closure. Not punishment, not retaliation, but finality. Princess Anne's closing remarks, according to briefing notes, were expected to be brief but unmistakable. A royal name is not a costume, it is not a shield, and it is not a currency. The implications were clear. The Sussex era of narrative ambiguity was ending. Not through outrage, not through leaks, but through boundaries. As speculation continued abroad and silence held on the other side of the Atlantic, the monarchy positioned itself not as a participant in drama, but as a custodian of continuity. This was no longer about who said what or which platform carried the loudest voice. It was about responsibility. Responsibility to the institution, responsibility to the public, and above all, responsibility to the next generation. For the capital storyline, this moment stands apart, not because a marriage ended, but because the crown chose to speak in order, not emotion. February 2026 may not be remembered as the collapse of a relationship. It may be remembered as the moment the monarchy reclaimed clarity in an age of spectacle and reminded the world that legacy is not built through exposure, but through restraint.